Hey, this is Nick Moquet, Associate Editor at DigitalTrends.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at Apple's new 17-inch MacBook Pro, the 2011 version. Now, if this looks a lot like last year's MacBook Pro, that's pretty much because it is. Apple has actually left the unibody design completely untouched this year. It's exactly the same, but there's a lot more going on inside. The big news is actually Intel's second generation Core i7 processor, and that's been coupled with ATI's Radeon HD 6750 graphics. Apple has also added Intel's high-speed Thunderbolt port, and the battery life on this unit has jumped all the way up to 7 hours. So one of the most interesting features of this year's MacBook Pro is actually Intel's Thunderbolt port. It actually looks exactly the same as last year's mini display port, and it serves the same function too. You can actually hook up a monitor to it the same way you would with, say, an HDMI cable, but it does a lot more. Thunderbolt can actually move data at up to 10 gigabits per second, which is really blazing fast. Unfortunately, right now there's not a lot that takes advantage of that. Eventually you'll be able to hook up peripherals like hard drives, cameras, and so on, and have your computer actually talk to them almost as fast as if they were inside the computer itself. But right now you're just going to be waiting on peripherals that actually take advantage of that. So let's talk a little bit about performance. Apple actually claims that the second generation Core i7 in this year's MacBook Pro is twice as fast as the one in last year's MacBook Pro, and that the ATI Radeon HD 67 graphics are 3 times as fast. That's probably a little bit optimistic. You're not going to see performance gains quite that dramatic, but that's not to say that this MacBook Pro is anything but fast. So probably one of the very best ways to show off that power is in gaming, and I have Half-Life 2 open here to show you what I'm talking about. Now granted, this is a game from 2004. It's not that new, it's not that taxing on a system, but here I'm running it at full 1920 by 1200 resolution with every setting to maximum. And if you see in the upper right here, my frames per second is actually 120 right now. And we weren't actually able to get the system to go below 90 in this game. So although there aren't a lot of games available to play in OS X, the MacBook Pro 17-inch will pretty much play anything you want that's available. So one of the really cool things about Apple's MacBook Pro, the 17-inch version, is that you actually get an honest 7 hours of battery life out of it, which is a lot for a notebook this size and with the power that this notebook actually has. One of the ways that Apple's done that is actually by making the battery not user replaceable. It's sealed inside. As a result of that, the battery actually has a greater capacity. So for instance, this has a 95 watt-hour battery. An equivalent HP notebook that we looked at, also a 17-inch, had 73 watt-hours. So you can kind of see how they've made a trade-off. You can't remove the battery to replace it yourself, but as a result, you get more battery life. Apple's new 17-inch MacBook Pro is fast, flashy, and fun, but it's also $2,500. You do get what you pay for. There's a lot of power in this machine, and the battery life especially makes it pretty unique for something in this size class. However, if you don't need either the battery life or the power, you might be better suited by either going to last year's 17-inch MacBook Pro or looking at a Windows equivalent, which in some cases can be found for under $1,000.